Manoj?
Yeah. A warm good afternoon to everybody. We start with the first session of the ABIS 2020 Digital Conference. The subject is HDR the future? I'm proud to present Mr. Alphonse Roy, renowned DOP, ISC certified Cinema EOS Platinum Associate. Mr. Roy has a check. Mr. Roy has a checkered career as a DOP, and now I would like to hand the stage to Mr. Roy. Over to you, Mr. Roy.
Good afternoon, everybody. And we're talking about HDR. We've done this session before, but we're redoing it now. Most people think that HDR, like what happens with still photography, a high dynamic range. That's not the word. It is high dynamic range, but in motion picture, it's not what you do with stills. So get into the topic. What is the significance HDR? One of the key things you see with HDR is you see best whites or highlights with details which you would have never seen before. And very vibrant and lifelike colors because the bit rate is high. And the best black details ever reproduced by digital media. This is what makes HDR different from standard dynamic range. Where can we see HDR? That's a big question today because of Corona and various things. One of the best places to see it is if you go down to any place where they are selling televisions, and if you go and ask them for HDR television display devices, like OLED devices, the popular brands like LG, Sony, Samsung, and you would get to see it there. And one of the popular brands, you see the kind of ad which is being played there. You will notice the kind of highlights which kind of stand out. The blacks, the kind of blacks every cinematographer dreams about, can never see it in any kind of medium. And the colors, when you look at it, it's real lifelike colors, you know. And I've just got some samples here from one of the popular brand televisions. And what you see here itself is quite impressive. If you notice in this ad, they have shot this ad, this demo video, to kind of highlight the effects of HDR. One is kind of amazing highlights and the rich blacks. This is one of the visual. If you notice this, you see the highlight on the on the teapot. You see the highlight. That's kind of literally going to the peak. Why have they used a red flower? You will get to know about it. And why have they used, you look at the nozzle where the tea would pour out, you see the subtle black details. Very similarly, look at this frame. They've got green, they've got highlight. Again, look at the highlight on the left. It's much, much more brighter. And the blacks and the gradual fall off what you see. There's a reason behind all this stuff. As I had mentioned earlier, it's not what we do in still photography, where we click multiple images, come down to editing software and merge them together. You know, you have the bracketed plus exposure and minus exposure. That's how we extend the dynamic range. It isn't either what you see on the iPhone. Well, that's the big question. How do we achieve HDR in professional digital camera? It has nothing to do with, very little to do with camera and more to do with the display device. What happens in the standard dynamic range display devices, you have, it can only reproduce 10 stops of dynamic range, and the peak brightness is only 100 nits. Whereas if you move into HDR, the display device can show you 15 stops of dynamic range, and the nits, the brightness value, it goes up to 1000 nits and even more, depending on the brand and television. Most HDR TVs are expected to show 1000 nits, but not all makes of HDR television show 1000 nits. Most other TVs only show 250 nits. So standard definition stands at 100 nits and HDR at 1000 nits. You can imagine how the highlights will kind of look different in the SDR as well as in HDR. What is nits? That's the most popular term going around. It's the unit of measurement that describes how bright your television or any other display device is. The number is directly proportional to the brightness of the screen. This is what the graphic representation of the color space, the BT709. Look inside, you see the yellow triangle, and then you see the black triangle. The black triangle, shows the larger color space of HDR, and you can see how little the yellow color space, the 709 color space, it covers very little of colors. You'll see it much better. One of the key things is we use 709 in standard definition, standard dynamic range. In HDR, we work in 2020 color space. You'll see in the next representation even better. The horizontal space shows the color space width, whereas the vertical column shows the nits. This is the BT709. Can you see the BT 2020? This is exactly what makes the big difference when we say that the difference between SDR and HDR. Can you see the increased color space on the green? How much of green more is revealed? How much more on the red? And this stops at 100 nits, whereas this goes all the way up to 1000 nits. Now, this is the reason when the popular brand demo ad, they used a teapot with an highlight because that will show this 1000 nits. They used a red flower because the increased red space reveals the red. And then they used a green flower because that is to highlight how much more green can be revealed on it. So, yeah. But this is what makes HDR. If we were to summarize it, SDR would have 100 nits, peak brightness, and works on Rec 709 color space with only 10 stops of latitude. HDR, whereas it works on 1000 nits with a 2020 color space and hang on a minute. Yeah, and 14 stops latitude. Cinematographers prep for the HD. Before I go into this, I'd like to show a video of something which I had shot with a Canon C700 FF, the full frame camera. And just give me a minute. Going into the video.
पोलीस कोठडीत हाल हाल करून मारला.
हा एक अपघात होता असा निष्कर्ष क्राईम ब्रांचनी काढलाय. कोणीच साक्षीदार नाही.
ते विषय कसा आहे माहिती का, पोलीसवाले पण आपले जातभाई पण माई पण आपलेच.
कोणा एकाच त्या घटनेवर नियंत्रण राहत नाही. इथे ते एवढे लोक एकत्र आलेत फक्त 4200 रुपयासाठी.
किती वर्ष केस लढणार आहेस? हे बघ, इथं आमच्या विरुद्ध एक बी कोणी शब्द काढणार नाही. आम्हाला फासावर सोडून तुला काय बी मिळणार नाही. झालं गेलं, विसरून जा.
का केलास तसं?
जर का मी खरं सांगितलं तर आणखी खून होती लागत.
तू फक्त तुझाच विचार करतेस माई, आणि बाकीच्यांकडनं खऱ्याची मागणी करतेस.
हे म्हणजे नितीनला रोज मारल्यासारखं झालंय, आणि उद्या मीच मिले तर?
Yeah. This film is not yet released. It has gone through festivals and stuff. Unfortunately, due to Corona, it was kind of stopped. It hasn't reached out to the public. This was shot on the Canon C700 full frame chip. One of my most favorite cameras. Probably this was the first film which was shot with the Canon C700. And it's an amazing low light sensitivity. The closing shot which you saw, the lady getting into the water, that was shot at kind of 4:45 in the morning, much before sunset. And you will notice another shot where she comes behind this boy and the boy finishes the dialogue and walks towards his house, where you see the bulb burning in his house. That shot was taken 45 minutes after sunset. We pushed ourselves. We wanted to bring in the story as real to the screen. There is another major in terms of latitude challenge was the sun is rising, and we had this whole dialogue scene which we had rehearsed the previous day, and the next morning at sunrise we shot it, while the sun is rising and the sun is in the frame. This was just shot 60 kilometers away from Bombay. I don't think any other camera could have done it. We didn't even have any fill lights, because it's right at dawn. We could see details in the shadow. We could see the sun is not bleaching out. It's perfectly fine. And the colors, you name it, that's the beauty of this. The same thing we've done HDR. And when we did the HDR, we suddenly realized the whole lighting was done for SDR. And when you go down to HDR, it looks so bad. There is so much excessive fill light, you had to crush the blacks to quite an extent. So that's when I decided, okay, I need to kind of do something on HDR. And we had the opportunity of the film. Unfortunately, I don't have the film to show it to you, but I can talk about the experience. A film which was scripted by Suhasini Maniratnam and directed by Revati. And we had to, because of Corona, we had to shoot it in her house. So we picked up the Canon C500 Mark II. It's such a small camera, easy to kind of shoot inside the house. And I said that I'm shooting this for HDR because I didn't have lights. We were allowed only 5 people as crew. And we had, whatever the house lights and stuff, we put it across. And we shot it. And then when we went to Bombay, Ashirwad Hatkar as prime focus did the color correction on a HDR monitor. It was unbelievable what the C500 Mark II could do, right outside the window, there is a bright sunlight, there is an indoor, and we could amazing details here and there everywhere. And you have to see it to believe it. There is, let me just go back to the cameraman's prep, cinematographer's prep for the HDR, the PowerPoint, yeah. Log or raw, that's one of the key factors. Number 2, there are various cameras, but higher the latitude, better the dynamic range and wider range of tones. The OLED display devices can show so much. Point number 3, very obvious, higher the bitrate, much better and closer to real colors. I mean, what I experienced was when I shot this Corona film, I shot it on Canon lenses, the new Canon Sumer lenses. you have to see it to believe it, with such a high resolution, where we constantly read in American Cinematographer, everybody talks about throwing in diffusions because things are so sharp in a higher resolution, and modern lenses have such high MTF, and you don't want to see the moon craters on the face and all this kind of stuff. But with the Sumer lenses, what I shot, it's unbelievable. It's got a built-in a level of softness. With the resolution, I get the sharpness, and the colors, are reproduced so good. It literally makes you, feel it is truly happening on the screen. If rest of the elements, I mean, in my view, cinema is all about making people believe that it is real, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and lovely. And I love Indian skin tone, I want my films to look like Indian films. And we have such a variety of skin tone in India. It's a celebration of browns, unlike shooting in America or UK. And the Sumer lenses worked very well. The My Gut film, which won me the best cinematography at the Singapore International Film Festival, again, that was shot on Canon lenses. And there's another clip which I'm going to show you, another trailer, a film titled Bittersweet, which has been kind of selected for the Busan International Festival. Again, that has been shot with Canon lenses. Anyway, coming down to the fourth point, ideal to have a DIT with waveform monitor and HDR monitor, 1000 nits and above. That is to make, as I told you, like when I had to shoot with the Canon C500 Mark II, I didn't have an HDR monitor, so I couldn't make my judgments in terms of fill light and stuff, because what you are used to kind of trained to kind of shoot at the 10 stop latitude, when you suddenly have 14 stop latitude, there is a level of fill light you get used, your exposure will be right, your key will be right, and you don't want a flat image, and so you need a monitor to kind of make that judgment. Point number 5 is about what I was trying to say. Decide your contrast ratios parallel with an SDR monitor, as we are still in the transition stage. Well, that's the truth. We are shooting for HDR. Where will the HDR come out? HDR will come out on OTTs, Netflix and all these OTT. They kind of, when you put out a HDR film, you get it automatically on your television set. If it is an OLED television, which can reproduce HDR, then, a thing changes on the right on top of it. It says HDR right top of the frame, and things go into HDR, and you start seeing HDR. So does that mean that what will happen to images, what we have shot in HDR, when it is shown on SDR display devices? Do you have a whole lot of formats which go for it? You must have heard about the term hybrid log gamma. That comes into place, when you have an HDR content and it has to be seen on a SDR device, then it kind of takes care of it. Like that, there are various formats. You have the Dolby Vision, which is the ST2084 HDR10, HDR10 plus, PQ, advanced HDR Technicolor. Probably it's not relevant because Technicolor during Corona is going through very bad times. And you have the HDR1, HDR2, and HDR3. These are all the various formats which we need to kind of get into. To answer another point is, continue with the point, that HDR content, can it be seen only on television? Can it be seen on a screen? There are 26 large cinema halls with HDR screens. Projectors cannot do this reproduction of the HDR range on a projected screen, because that comes to only 40 nits, and we are talking about 1000 nits. So what they do is they create very small pitch LED walls, which are so beautiful. From a distance, you don't see the pixels, and you see an output with a 14 stop latitude, and colors as real, close to as real as possible. There are 26 cinema screens around the world. 2 of them are in India. One in Bombay, one in Bangalore. I will now just take you through the Bittersweet trailer that again has been shot with the Canon C700 full frame camera. Honestly, it's one of my most favorite cameras, I would say.
मला माहित बी नव्हतं आपल्या राज्यातील सर्वात समृद्ध व्यवसायाला अशी काळी किनार असेल. मीडियावाल्यांचा रोग सरकार आणि शुगर लॉबी यांच्या संगनमताकडे. आपल्याला या हिस्टेक्टॉमी प्रकरणात लक्ष दिलं पाहिजे.
खरं तर या बायका ज्या परिस्थितीत राहतात ती अतिशय निकृष्ट म्हणू शकतो. डॉक्टरांना उगाच पळीचा बकरा म्हणून.
तू ठरले ना त्याच्या कमी तुडती. तिने तिचा कोटा नाही पूर्ण केला, त्याचे 500 दंडाचे 500.
तुम्ही आधी का नाही सांगितलं ह्या कामाला सुट्टी नसते?
अगं सुट्टी कोणालाच नसती. एवढ्यात तर हंगाम असतोय ना, बाकी वर्षभर तर आरामच असतोय.
मी 2 दिवसापूर्वी बोराडे डॉक्टरांना भेटले. ते म्हणले माझा गर्भाशय काढला तरी मी बाईच राहीन. मायला सांगू नको सांग, बघच तर 3 दिवस तिची काळजी.
सगुना कुठं दिसत नाही र. सकाळपासून पाहिली नाही मी तिला.
डॉक्टर आणि ठेकेदारांचा एकत्रित कट असू शकतो.
म्हणजे परिस्थिती चांगली म्हणायची.
Okay, this is again the Canon C700 full frame, and if you notice that man coming and falling, that is shot afternoon 3 o'clock straight against light. I have the western sky inside my frame. The sun is just out of the frame. And you see the man coming and falling all in the shadow, such a wide shot. There is no fill light, nothing. That's the level of shadow details you can pick up. You see that girl cooking. We literally shot it with flame. We wanted that exact orange. And these are Marathi films, you know. They don't have, a big Bollywood budget kind of a stuff. And the first film, My God, was finished in 18 days. This second film, Bittersweet, was finished in 20 days. And, we're extremely happy with what the camera contributes. It helps me to save so much time. The viewfinder is an amazing viewfinder. It shows me exactly, I can make a judgment of what I'm going to get finally. And that's the greatness of this stuff. And there's another additional experience I had with the C500 Mark II, because I was in a tight corner situation because of the corona. I couldn't have a focus puller, and I had to do really big tele shots. And the beauty about the C500 Mark II was the Canon said that you could pull the mount out from an PL mount and you can put on the EF mount. So I had a 200mm Canon EF mount lens, and I had to do some tele shots. I put on the 200 and I said, fine, I don't have a focus puller. What do I do? I switched into the autofocus mode. I would not have done it in the past because I always considered getting into auto is kind of an amateurish job. I'm a professional cinematographer. I'm shooting professional stuff. So I always need a focus puller and all this kind of stuff. A tight corner pushed me into something where I had to unlearn and change my whole attitude towards it. It did such an amazing follow focus. You won't detect it at all. We literally kind of moved into a phase like most professional cinematographers would realize that if you take up a full frame chip camera and you put an 85 lens, and if you want to shoot at even at 2.8, we do think twice. Will the focus puller be able to pull focus or not? Keeping an actor at kind of 7 feet or 8 feet. With a 200mm lens at 2.8 with the EF lens, with autofocus, I've shot it, and it's pin sharp on the eyes when the actor turns and moves, which all professional cinematographers, we all know that it's not feasible for any focus puller to kind of achieve that level. So that's another great thing. And all through my life, I've started my cinematography with a C-mount camera, Bolex. In a C-mount, if you had to fit your zoom lens, you fix the zoom lens, then put it on the tripod, and you all the time check whether the flange has sat properly or not. You zoom in tele and zoom out wide, break your eyes with the viewfinder which is not as bright, and pull it out. That was the major reason why a bayonet mount came out and RPL mount will just come out. So whenever anything to do with a mount and a flange focal, we always ran to the service section. But Canon has brought out something on the C500. On a day, for 4 times, I took the mount out on location myself with just one Allen key, replaced it with the PL mount, put on the PL mount, shot it, pulled it out, once again put the EF mount. Everything was perfectly fine. I said I'm experimenting. I can't do that on a big film, but I was lucky I had the short film to kind of do it. And that's a major technical development. And should we, Manoj, now move on to questions and interaction? Manoj?
Yes, Mr. Ryan. Can we move on to the questions?
Yeah, we can move on to the questions. And should I stop sharing screen? How do I do that? There's something. Okay, fine. Yeah, we can go on to the questions.
So the first question is, which 4K camera is equipped to shoot HDR video?
Any camera which has a 13-stop latitude and 10-bit, and it can record RAW or log. Most of the Canon cameras are perfectly suited for HDR. The difference happens primarily on the display device. If I were to talk about Canon cameras, it's all these cameras had it even yesterday itself. Even before the HDR devices, display devices came out. Primarily the difference happens in the display device, but you need to be extra careful when you shoot for HDR. Does that answer the question?
Yes, sir. Thanks for that. Okay, moving on to the next question that we have from the audience. Netflix and Amazon offer HDR content with Dolby Vision and other HD formats. How is the HDR for web series and cinema different?
Good question. It has to, it's dependent on, when it comes down to OTT, whether it's Netflix or Amazon, they have different technical parameters, So based on that, the post house chooses a setting where you can kind of do it, and then we do a test with the Netflix itself. There is a bit of a difference. Very difficult to kind of pinpoint exactly what the difference is. What you do for Amazon is slightly different. What you do for Netflix is different. I have a couple of tests to do. I have a Xyla chart with me, which I'm going to shoot and do a test. Then I would come out with exactly what the big difference is. When it comes down to screen, honestly, I have not seen the screen in Bombay. A friend of mine, Sudeep Chatterjee, a senior cinematographer, he has seen a show there, and he was highly impressed with it. I have not seen the Bangalore theatrical projection either, so I don't have info on that. Because of the corona, I couldn't travel. Yeah, Hemant?
Mr. Roy, how do you determine where to place middle gray in HDR workflow? Is it the same as SDR workflow?
Good question. Okay, which is, once you do the latitude test, then you would know exactly where to place the mid-grade. You're talking about it will not be the same as SDR, because we are talking about 10 stops to 11 stops. Camera manufacturers claim 11 stops, even if the camera is capable of, let's talk about the Canon C700FF. It's capable of 14 stops for sure, but I've done a test with it. Ashirvad has done the test along with me. We have checked it on the HDR monitor where we see 14 stops. The minute we put it onto the projector, we only see 11 stops. So When it comes down to HDR display device, that can only reproduce 10 stops. So if you're talking about a midpoint which you take for SDR is going to be different for the HDR. You need to do a test to figure out where does it fall. And I haven't done the test. I'm dying to do it. Due to corona restrictions, I haven't, I'm at my house in Chennai. The minute I reach Bombay, I would start doing the test. Hi, Manoj. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
Yeah. One last question, Mr. Roy. You mentioned that autofocus works wonders even at f2.8, even in low light.
Yeah.
And how much subject movement is advisable?
I tell you, with Canon, it's unbelievable, man. I did a portrait face, like I was shooting for OTT because that's a film for charity for Madras Actors Association, So they're doing an anthology of kind of 5 stories. And I was at how much of a movement, how do we calculate it? I'll tell you, a chocker close-up you can do with a Canon EF mount, a normal actor talking, he turns, he looks here, that kind of a movement is perfect. I mean, I don't know how to put a unit for how much of a movement, but it works on a perfect normal cinema actor movement. And if I were to use a 600mm lens Canon, and follow a bike coming head on or panning along with it, I would happily put it onto the autofocus and follow, and I'm very confident it will work. I don't have a work proof. I'm waiting for the corona to get over and I can prove it to you. Does that answer the question, Manoj? If you want any supplementary, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Roy, for this wonderful session. I would request all delegates to visit the Canon booth to see their newly launched C70 and interact with the experts from Canon and understand in depth the features of the C70.
Another point which I just want to add is a lot of people think that the Canon C700 or the C500 and stuff is kind of too expensive to afford and kind of stuff. I hired the camera in Bombay. It's around, my production guy says he paid only around 23 grand per day for this camera. So it's competitively priced when you look at the camera in terms of affordability. And what I've done is a Marathi film. Marathi films are all in low budget. And it's an amazing match, where you have the highest end of the quality at affordable price and a dependable camera, be it at kind of 4 inches from water with high humidity. When we took that water shot, it was perfectly fine. As much as when we were shooting in the sugarcane field in the afternoon, 1 o'clock sun in summer, we never had an issue with it. Great, that's it. Lovely, Manoj.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roy, for the presentation. Thank you very much.
Welcome.